Our next problem is, how do we deal with routing several layers? So we already discussed that we're not doing this type of a thing where we have just one layer with things routing for each other. So we're going to use the same basic idea. We're going to make one grid for each layer of routing. Okay? And not only that, we're going to say that each grid box can contain a via or a contact that goes between one grid layer and the next one. This gives us a new expansion layer. If up till now we were doing north and south and east and west, now we're going to have an up and down direction. Okay, so here we have two grid layers, metal 1 and metal 2. We have a source that happens to be, in this case, on metal 1 and a target on metal 2. Notice that a lot of these examples I'm making there kind of wrong for our basic planar VLSI type of processes, because our source and our target would always be on the bottom planar transistor front end layer. But just for the play example here, we just put the source on one layer and the target on the other. Another thing that we're going to play around with is we're going to say, aha, we can't have a via anywhere because it would be too hard to show our example, even though in essence we could have a via in any one of these boxes. We're going to say we have the option to put a via here and an option to put a via here. So when we look at metal 1, this is in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? 3 to 3. So this is also a 3, 3 because this via goes up to here, and this one is over here at 6, 2. So 6, 2 has a via. So this via will bring us up over to here. But actually, our real algorithm could go and cross the two layers at any point that's not already taken. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by marking our source as 1 and continue our wave expansion. And you see that within 4 steps, we hit a via. Okay, that means that we can now expand upwards. So our next step gives us the option to get to this point within 5 steps. So we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we will continue our expansion on our regular layer too. So our wave continues to expand over here, but now it also starts to expand on the second layer. So we continue over there. We get 6, 7, 8, and look at that, we reached our second target. That was before we went up our second via, because to get to this place it would have taken us 9 steps. So we've reached our target within 8 steps, and now we can backtrace through the via and find our complete net. So that was multi-layer routing, but that's not all. I mean, actually there's a lot more stuff, but one of the things we want to discuss is that vias, we've already mentioned, have relatively high resistance, and we should prefer to stay on the same layer and not keep on going up and down between layers. Another thing is we said that we want to use Manhattan routing, where we have each layer only being routed in one direction, and then that helps us not block tracks and not have shorts and so forth. So we'll have a certain layer only going horizontally and another layer only, and that one was vertically, and another layer only going horizontally, and we can move between them using vias. But if we want to get from this place to this place, what we'll do is we'll use this layer going to the right and then go up in a via, and this layer going up. How do we make sure that the tool does that and doesn't just do that in one layer where it will block off additional horizontal layers this way? Okay, so how are we going to do that? What we're going to do is that, to penalize any type of a turn that we take, or any type of a jog when we're going the wrong way on the same layer. So we're going to find a way to actually come and prefer to route in a certain layer and direction, and this we're going to do with what we call non-uniform grid costs. Okay, so let's go back to our example that has 2 metal layers, and in this case we define that metal layer 1 should be horizontally routed, and metal layer 2 should be vertically routed. In addition, we have our source over here and our target over here. They are on the same layer this time, and we have our vias, which we've only put in 2 spaces, here and here and here and here on the second layer. Okay, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to say, listen, these vias, we don't want to use them that much, so we're going to give them a cost of 10 versus a cost of 1 just for a regular type of route. Another thing is we're going to say that if on metal layer 1 we can horizontally route with a cost of 1, and on metal 2 we can vertically route on the cost of 2, Well, if we take the wrong way route, for example, if we go up and down, or I mean north and south on metal 1, our cost of our route will be 10, and if we go east and west on metal 2, the cost of our route will be 10. And let's see what this does. So we start with our source costing 1, and we know that we can go again horizontally. We can go to the east at the cost of 1, but the second we want to go north and south, it's going to cost us 10. So to get to these two adjacent boxes, it's going to cost us 2 to get to the box that's east of our source, but to get to the box that's north of our source, it's already going to cost us 11. Okay, and we can continue on this way. We'll always look for the lowest cost grid box that we have currently. So our lowest cost grid box is 2, so we're going to expand 2 to the right and up, and we'll see that we get 3 and 12, and we get to a via over here, and going through the via we also know that it's going to cost us 10, so up to here it's going to cost us 13. Our lowest cost right now in our whole grid is the 4 over here, so there's no reason to expand 13 until we've finished expanding 4, so we continue over here going 4, 5, 6, and 6 is still our lowest cost, so again, but it can only go up and down, or north and south, which will cost us 16. And we've actually gotten to the point where 13 now is our lowest costing box in the whole thing. So now we're going to assume that we used this via, and we're at 13 over here. And remember that now going north and south will cost us 1, while going east and west will cost us 10. So going south we get 14, and going west we get 23, and we continue like that. And now this via, which is the it costs 15. This guy also costs 15. So those were the lowest costing boxes in our grid. So we also continued going this way there. And what else? We went with our 15 down, and we got to 25 over here. Okay, but still 15 is our lowest costing box, so we continue to 16, 17, and now actually our lowest costing box over here is the 16 over here, and what we see is that our next step will actually bring us within the cost of 1 to our target, which will be 26. So we see that we were able to use our non-uniform grid cost to go through different layers. We cleaned that up, and what we see is that we only routed horizontally on metal 1, and we only routed vertically on metal 2. We chose to use 2 vias on the way. This is, of course, a strong function of the cost that we gave to vias and non-uniform and wrong direction routing. So this is a type of heuristic that we need to, again, set our costs in a smart way. So how do we implement all of this in software? Well, grids are huge. Let's say we have a 1 by 1 centimeter chip. That's a very, very big chip, but let's say that's the size of our chip. Let's say we have a 100 nanometer routing track, which is a good assumption for a nanoscaled process. It's probably even quite smaller than that. And let's say we have 10 routing layers, and for right now we'll just say that they're equivalent routing layers. But if we start multiplying each of those, we get 100 billion grid cells. Well, 100 billion is a really big number, and how are we going to actually deal with all of that, trying to route and keep all that data in our memory? So we need a low cost representation for all this. So there are different ways to do that. We can only store the wave front. We can remember which cells have been reached, what cost and from which direction, instead of remembering the entire grid. And we can use Dijkstra's algorithm to find the cheapest cell first. We also store the data in the heap to be able to easily choose the shortest route. But doing this is very hard, especially with the mini heuristics that I mentioned along the way, and with the amount of data that we have here with so many routes that we need to do. So we'll use different heuristics. We'll have to use heuristics that will help us choose which net to route first. Try to do that in a way that will help us and get to a better optimal solution. We want to bias towards the right direction so we don't start looking a lot in the wrong direction, wasting time, memory, and so forth. And then we have problems. We have all kinds of nanoscaled problems of crazy design rules. How do we go about fixing them? We have to make all kinds of heuristics about that. And we have many more problems. So making a router is a real tough thing. And routers tend to run for many hours in order to route blocks of chips. Well, how are we going to do this in practice then? Of course, what we're going to do is try to make our problem much smaller. And that we do by dividing and conquering, or using a global step before our detailed step. And this is called global routing. So what we're going to do with a big chip, we're going to make, or chip or block, we're going to make our problem smaller by dividing the block into big coarse regions. For example, we'll take 200 by 200 tracks for each box and call it a G box or global box. Okay, and now we'll maze route the global boxes instead of maze routing the detailed box. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our chip, we're going to divide it into a more coarse grid, and then for each of these cells we're going to say we have this and this amount of sources, but not exactly say where they are inside the cell, just say that this is one box. And we're going to get to some sort of a route that goes from each source to each target. Of course, we're going to be able to have several sources and targets and routes inside each box, and we can actually have some sort of representation that will say how many routes are left through that box instead of just blocking them off each time we mark one net. So by doing that, we're going to also take care of congestion. So congestion is the number of routes that are actually going through each edge of a box. And so if we take a global route that goes like this, for that net, it's going to take, one net this way, one net this way, one net that way, one net that way. And if we had a total of 200 nets, then we only have 199 left. And we can have some sort of a dynamic type of representation that will tell us the dynamic cost, which will tell us how much congestion we have there, and if we should use that box, or maybe we should give it a larger cost and use another box for the next net we want to route. So after we did that, then we can look at our specific net here. We kind of do some sort of assignment that says, aha, now we have our source that was over here. We have to we have our target is over here instead of over here, and now we just have to do this route. Then we have this box, it has our source over here and our target over here, so it just has to do this route. This one has its source over here and its target over here, and it created this route. And once we connect all of them together, we'll get our fully connected long route that goes from the actual source to the actual target. But we did it in smaller parts where our smaller boxes were much easier to deal with in a complexity level.